Hi there, Rene Cusson, Music Chair for the BC Pipers Association here. I'm going to talk today about getting the sound out of your pipe that you're wanting for a performance situation. Now, that's regardless of whether it's competition or just going out and putting on a proper performance on a great bagpipe with the kind of confidence and everything that goes into making a good performance. There are things that need to be done, knowledge that needs to be gained in advance before you can say, this is all I need to do on the day. So, as part of your learning plan, you need to have learned as much as you can about things such as reed selection, having the reeds set up properly in the bagpipe, that's both the chanter reed and the drone reeds, having the bag in perfect condition, all these sorts of things. What else? Having the materials that you need for taking care of your bagpipe in a performance situation, like the swabs, extra hemp, tape, any of these things that we might want to have on hand that are going to help us on the day. Now, these things that are going to help us on the day, these maintenance items, for example, shouldn't really have to come into play if you've been doing your homework. So let's back up to the day before a performance. When we practice on the day before a performance, again, whether that's a competition or any kind of performance, for me, I treat every performance with the same level of expectation of myself and my instrument. So it makes no difference whether I'm stepping onto the competition boards or whether I'm going to give a recital or just do a public performance of some kind. The day before, and certainly in the week practicing before, I'm taking note of things like the amount of time it takes for my drones to be settled. If there are any odd things with the chanter, am I constantly having to make changes to it? I shouldn't be. If I've got a good reed in there and I've got it set up, there should be minimal adjusting needing to be done. But certainly on that day before you're going to do a performance, you want to make sure all these things are cared for, that in your practice that day you've been able to say to yourself, okay, it took me 5 minutes to have my drones settled in the rest of the week. Let's see if it's 5 minutes again tonight. And then you check that out, and if that's the amount of time that was required and they were settled in after that, then that's important information to take to the day of the performance. Also, taking note of what your conditions are like. Is your house colder, warmer some days than others, damper, things like that? And did that influence how you were setting up your bagpipe? You will want on the actual day of the performance to try and tune up your bagpipe under similar conditions to those in which you're going to play. So for example, if it's a competition field outdoors and you're going to be playing in the sun, you should be settling and setting up your instrument in the sun. Or at the very least, you should get it going, settled in, and then come out into the sun. But of course, being aware that it is going to change significantly going from the shade to the sun. So perhaps you were as well off to actually get it going in the sun. That's my preference always. And if it's indoors, you just want to try and approximate what the conditions are going to be like there too. So you certainly need to sort of check out the staging area and see what the temperature is like there. And, are there annoying things like fans going that you may have no control over? But if you do have control over them, then you talk to somebody in charge and make sure things like that are shut off or altered for your performance. On the day, assuming you've done all these preliminaries and have your bagpipe set up in optimal condition, it was seasoned properly when it needed to be, the drones are all going to cut in as they should, the chanter is pitched, or was the day before, accurately, you should be able to pull your pipes out of their case, blow them up, and they should at least sound like they're basically in the ballpark when you get them up on your shoulder. You may rough tune them in if you need to, and then just do your playing for a little bit. A variety of things. For some people, they're better, if it's a competition, they're better off to stay away from the tunes that they're going to compete with and play other things to keep the performance real and fresh. And for some of you, it's not a problem for you to run through the tunes or parts of tunes, but don't overdo it on the day. That's one of the biggest problems that people have, is getting their instrument out, and even if it is in good condition, overplaying, tiring themselves out, maybe getting the instrument too wet, and just not leaving yourself in a condition to get up there and do justice to the performance that you want to give. Now, if you pull your pipes out of the box and they're not working so well, and well, those are usually signs that you haven't done your work during the week. I mean, bagpipes are bagpipes, and we all know that there's the odd day that we get them out, and it's like, oh no, why is that chanter sounding the way it is? Perhaps we have a collapsing F. Do you know what to do with that? Okay, if you don't, that's an important thing to talk to your instructor about and learn how to deal with chanter reeds and the kinds of problems that will occur. Typically though, if you've been taking care of your bagpipe and putting it away properly, not leaving it in its case wet, swabbing it out when it needed it, and it always needs it if it's been damp at all. So drones should have been swabbed. Chanter, my preference is to keep it in a stock, and I use one of the commercially available stocks, and I like the Canard, in fact, and I think the humidity control may not be a bad idea on the chance that it contributes something positive to the reed. So my chanter is always left in that right up to any performance, and once I'm finished performing, it's put away again. The only exception is on a games day or in a recital situation where I'm having maybe a short break and I know my instrument is not soaking wet. Then I might leave the chanter in the pipes. And again, that's partly experience, because you know how long you can sort of leave your bagpipe before it really alters. If you're unsure, then you're best to take the chanter out of the pipes and set it aside. On the day of a performance, do not leave your pipes someplace where the conditions are going to adversely affect them. For example, you don't leave your pipe case in the sun. So it should be in a cool, shaded spot. If you're in a performance hall situation, don't have it sitting by a heater or radiator. Any source of heat that warms up the bagpipe more than it should be is not going to be conducive to good playing. Again, we want to leave the pipes either under cool conditions, not cold, or conditions identical to those in which we're going to play. So on the day, the focus is get the pipes out, be wherever you're going to be early. If it's a competition, be there early enough to check in and get your number. And on the day of a competition, I just pull my pipes out of the case and try them. I just fire them up just to see if they're going. Maybe I give them a couple of minutes of air, and then I put them aside. I don't spend a whole bunch of time playing them early on. That's going to be for when I pull them out maybe half an hour before when my event is scheduled to start. And at a Highland Games, or even at other public performances, you should be keeping track regularly of the time. Times sometimes change, and you could find yourself on earlier. So it's important to be aware of these things and allow that kind of time. But you want about half an hour earlier than your performance, ideally, to get your instrument out. And then you just want to play it in. Okay, bagpipe came out of the case, worked perfectly, and sounded great. And you stop, they've settled in, and you've still got 20 minutes left. What do? Well, you don't necessarily spend that whole time playing. You could, but you might be lessening what the performance could have been. You might be getting the pipe more damp than it needs to be. So my suggestion is, if times aren't altering drastically for you, or they haven't said it's going to be longer before you have to play, then it might be worthwhile just taking a little break, walking around, having a drink of water, because it's important to stay hydrated. And then maybe 10 minutes before you're going to be performing, fire up the pipe again. It shouldn't take as long to settle in the second time, and maybe go through a few tunes, however you want your routine to be, and then get out there and do the stuff. After you've done the stuff, the bagpipe should be swabbed, and don't just assume that, oh, I only got a little bit of moisture into it. Take care of it properly. Get the moisture out of it. And that includes the reeds too. So often people will swab their drones and leave dampness in the reeds, condensation on them, especially these synthetic reeds we use now do not tend to wick the moisture in the same way that cane does. And so it's important to also blow the moisture out of them and possibly unseat those drone reeds and dry them as well. I often go to that extent, especially if I've had a big performance and know that those things are wet. But that's partly knowing your own instrument, knowing if it is getting soaked or if it's not. Those are things you do need to take into account before the events, on the day, and making sure that your instrument is ready for whatever comes later. If you're a solo player who plays with a band, then you especially, especially if you're using the same chanter or the same drone reeds, which you probably are, you want to make sure that you've dried out your instrument. And if you've got a zipper bag, you can always open that up. You can keep a rag of some kind, towel, that you can use to swab the inside of the bag and get any excess moisture out of it. And have that instrument in optimal condition again for playing with the band later. Because as a band player, you're part of a team, and you really don't want to be letting the band down by not having an optimal instrument when you go to the band later. If you have any more questions about these things, you should discuss them with your teacher, and I'm certainly available too. You can be tracked down if you want to go over any of these points. Anyway, best of luck, and I'm interested in hearing about what more things you might like to know on this topic. This is essentially getting your pipes ready and tuned up on the day.